Hi everyone, welcome back to my educational channel on biology. Teacher Janet here. In this video, we'll discuss eutrophication from Form 5 syllabus, Chapter 10. So have you ever seen fish dying in a river like this? The fishes are floating on top of a layer of algae. Okay, so what's going on here? Now, when you see this phenomena, it means that the fish probably lacked oxygen and then died due to the layer of algae, okay, the green substance on the water surface. So let's find out more about this phenomenon called eutrophication, which is caused by human activities, and how we can reduce it or prevent it. Our learning standards are as follows. 10.12, analyze threats to the environment. We're going to discuss this one topic, eutrophication, and we already discussed climate change, global warming, deforestation, and loss of biodiversity. Okay, so we'll discuss eutrophication, and then in the next few videos, we'll be discussing pollution and human population explosion. So in your concept map, right, we are at this point, threats to the environment, and we are going to discuss eutrophication here. All right, so there are a few more topics to go. Now here are the study tips to obtain full marks for this section, especially for essay and structured questions. For each threat, phenomena, environmental problem, we must know and remember the following. Okay, memorize the definition based on the textbook definition, all right, not other books. The sources and the causes of this threat, then the effects and the impact, plus the explanation, how did the effects occur. Then solutions, which are ways to reduce the problem, plus the explanation, how does it work. Next, memorize and use the right keywords for each threat, all right? So that will get you the marks because the marking scheme is based on the right keywords or key phrases. For example, for eutrophication, some of the keywords will be like algal bloom, all right, and then reduction in rate of photosynthesis, and then bacteria, which are decomposers, the process of decomposition, and so forth. So let's continue. The fourth threat that we are discussing in this video is eutrophication. Here's the story of a river. Once upon a time, there was a river that was very clear, clean, and pristine. Sunlight easily penetrated the sparkling waters, allowing submerged aquatic plants to thrive and photosynthesize. These plants provided oxygen for an abundance of aquatic life in the river, such as the fishes, prawns, and insects. So all these organisms live in perfect harmony, keeping the river's ecosystem in a healthy, natural balance. However, things started to change when development occurred. So the forests at the riverbanks were cleared to make way for farms, agricultural and other agricultural activities. So vegetable farms were built and vegetables planted near the riverbank. After some years, a green scum started to spread on the water surface, right? And later on, a lot of dead fishes were seen floating on the river surface. So what has happened? And how can we help to revert the condition of the river back to its original condition? Is it possible? Let's find out more. So to start off, we will use this infographic or diagram, okay, to explain how eutrophication occurs and then the effects of it, step by step. So start off with the cause of eutrophication. Now, on farms, farmers use fertilizers which contain nitrates and phosphates. They use them to promote the growth of their vegetables and other crops, and also to increase the crop yield. So these are the good benefits or the good points about fertilizers, all right? But fertilizers also have their disadvantages because when they are applied to the soil, they can be in excess. So there may be a lot of nitrates and phosphates in the ground. Then when it rains, the rainwater will dissolve these nitrates and phosphates. And these excess nitrates and phosphates in rainwater are carried into the river. They flow into the river. All right, so that's what happens. Now next, the nitrates and phosphates, the content of the nitrates and phosphates increases in the river, right? So we call that nutrient enrichment. Okay, that means eutrophication has occurred in which the water ecosystem becomes rich in nutrients such as nitrate and phosphate. That's the meaning of eutrophication. Water ecosystem becomes the process whereby the water ecosystem becomes rich in nitrates and phosphates, which are nutrients to what? To the algae and the plants. So the algae will use these nutrients, the nitrates and phosphates, to grow very quickly. All right. So eutrophication stimulates the rapid growth of algae on the water surface, covering the whole water surface with a green layer, okay, of the microorganisms, the algae. So you must mention that covers the water surface. All right. So what is the effect of all this? Now, when the algae grows on the water surface, it's a bad sign because it has two bad effects. Okay, two bad effects. The first one, let's look at this point here, number 4. The algae on the water surface will reduce the sunlight penetration into the water because they block out the sunlight, right? So submerged plants under the water surface, the aquatic plants cannot receive enough sunlight for photosynthesis. So when the rate of photosynthesis of these plants decreases, they will die, and also they won't release so much oxygen into the water when the rate of photosynthesis decreases. As we know, in the process of photosynthesis, the short form, oxygen is released, okay, which will dissolve in the water and is used for the respiration of organisms. But now the dissolved oxygen content in the water decreases due to a lower rate of photosynthesis. Thus, the aquatic organisms do not have enough oxygen for respiration and they will die. Okay, so this is the first effect of the algae that blocks out the sunlight from penetrating the water in the rivers and lakes. Now, second effect, okay, let's look at second effect, number 5. When the algae has grown old and reached the end of its lifespan, it will die and it will sink to the bottom of the river. Okay. Then, together with the dead organisms like the dead fishes and dead plants, they'll form a layer of dead organic matter at the bottom of the river. So the amount of organic matter will increase because a lot of algae will die, right? So this will cause the bacteria and fungi, which are decomposers in the water ecosystem, to increase. So what do these bacteria and fungi do? They break down the dead organic matter in order to obtain energy, much like we break down food substances, right, through the process of respiration, according to GOWAC. Glucose plus oxygen produces water, energy, and carbon dioxide. So bacteria will break down the organic matter using oxygen to produce energy for their own needs, and carbon dioxide as a byproduct will be released as a gas. Okay, so the oxygen will be used up by the bacteria and fungi for decomposition. And the more the organic matter, the higher the rate of decomposition. So we say that the biochemical oxygen demanded by this bacteria, right, increases. Okay, that means more oxygen now is needed for decomposition. So BOD increases. So BOD means the amount of oxygen needed by the bacteria and fungi to decompose the dead organic matter in 1 liter of that water sample. Okay, whether it's from the river, pond, or even tap water. Now, anyway, the BOD increases, the demand for oxygen increases, so the oxygen will be used up. The dissolved oxygen in the river will be used up, and the dissolved oxygen content or level in the water decreases excessively. In fact, it has decreased earlier when the aquatic plants died, all right, due to lack of sunlight. Now, secondly, now because of decomposition of dead substances, the dissolved oxygen level decreases even further, all right? and this will cause the fish to have lack of oxygen for respiration. They'll sort of suffocate in the river. They don't have enough oxygen. So aquatic organisms and fishes, like fishes, will die. So it will cause the river to become a dead river without uh, the living organisms, except for the algae growing on top and the bacteria at the bottom here. Okay, so the tip here is to explain all this, and remember, try to explain what happens to the algae first, and then the submerged plants, and then what happens to the fishes. Why does it happen? Why do the submerged plants die, the fish die, right? Then fourthly, the bacteria. Why the population of bacteria increases, right? And then what happens finally to the fish and other aquatic organisms to create a dead river, all right? So here are the notes on eutrophication. So they are based on the textbook content, okay? Because marking scheme for exams will be based on the textbook first of all, okay? Now, so definition, eutrophication is defined as a process in which water ecosystems like the lakes and rivers become rich with nutrients, okay? Remember this, rich with nutrients such as nitrates and phosphates that cause changes to the ecosystem structure, meaning they cause changes. For example, they cause rapid growth of algae in the rivers, and then this leads to less dissolved oxygen, okay, and finally the fish will die. All right, so just a brief idea here. All right, so please memorize the definition for eutrophication. It's when water ecosystems or lakes and rivers become rich with nutrients like nitrates and phosphates. Now, cause. The cause is the excessive use of nitrate and phosphate fertilizers in agricultural activities. This is just one of the main causes or the main sources of nitrates and phosphates. Okay, these excess nutrients dissolve in rainwater which flow into lakes and rivers. So there are other sources or causes of eutrophication which we'll see in the next slide. Right now, here this picture shows you the fertilizers. They can either be in granular form like granules, or they can be in liquid form. Here you see a farmer spraying the fertilizers on the vegetable farm. All right, on the vegetables. And another source of nitrates and phosphate is animal waste. Animal waste or animal feces. Please don't say the word shit, S-H-I-T, all right? Although it's a commonly used word, but then in the exam, use the proper term. The proper term is animal waste or animal feces. Animal feces, human feces, they all contain nitrates and phosphates, okay? So sewage. Sewage contains the human feces and urine. They contain lots of nitrates and phosphates too. So all this, if the sewage is not treated at an advanced level, the sewage water that is treated can still contain nitrates and phosphates that flow into the rivers and lakes. So let's discuss more about the sources of eutrophication. Now, based on the textbook, there are other sources of eutrophication in rivers and lakes. All right. Now, let's go through the whole list. Nitrates and phosphates from fertilizers, okay, used on vegetable farms. This one we discussed just now. Animal waste from animal farms also contain nitrates and phosphates. Phosphates and detergent residues from houses. So detergents used to wash clothes, all right, normally contain phosphates. But nowadays there are detergents that are free from phosphates, okay, eco-friendly detergents. So that will be better to prevent eutrophication from occurring, okay? Because these detergents, after we've washed the clothes using detergents, usually the soap water is just poured into the drain hole, right? So some of that may go into in the olden systems, the detergent water will just flow into the drain, right? So then the phosphates will be carried into the rivers and lakes from the drain. So next, treated sewage from sewage treatment plant. As we said, the human waste in the sewage contain nitrates and phosphates, just like animal waste. Next, waste substances from factories. So some factories may uh, produce waste substances that contain nitrates and phosphates, such as the fertilizer factories that produce fertilizers, right? Then next, mining activities. Okay, so the use of explosives may release some nitrates into the soil, and then uh, again, these nitrates can dissolve in rainwater and be carried into the rivers and lakes. Now, phosphates can come from the rocks, okay, that are broken down, all right, during the mining process. Construction sites also release nitrates and phosphates, especially from the land, especially if the land was used previously for agriculture, for planting of crops. So the land may already be full of these excess nitrates and phosphates, okay, from fertilizers. So when it's used, when construction is going on to build maybe houses or other buildings, the soil may be dug up, okay, and then this may contain the nitrates and phosphates left behind from agriculture. So let's discuss the effects of eutrophication again in the form of these notes. First of all, the water ecosystems like lakes and rivers become rich in nutrients, such as the nitrates and phosphates from the fertilizers. So this will lead to the rapid growth of algae, called the algal blooms, as shown here. And this forms a green layer that covers the water surface completely, like shown here. And there are two effects that happens. Number one, it will block out the sunlight. Okay, that is the first effect. When it blocks out the sunlight, then a chain of events occur. The rate of photosynthesis of these aquatic plants that are submerged in the water will decrease because of lack of sunlight. All right. So due to less photosynthesis, lower photosynthesis uh, rates, less oxygen is produced through photosynthesis. So the dissolved oxygen content in the water will decrease, okay, when the rate of photosynthesis decreases. Now, the aquatic plants will die due to lack of sunlight. And then the fish will die due to lack of oxygen, okay, in the water. And then the algae on the water surface will also die soon, all right? It will reach the end of its life cycle, then it will die. Okay, so the first effect, as we said, is when the algae blocks out the sunlight, and then it causes a reduction in the amount of dissolved oxygen, right? Now, the second effect, how the oxygen level continues to be depleted, occurs when there's a lot of dead aquatic organisms in water, which will cause the population of decomposer bacteria to increase. So this type of bacteria, which are decomposers, plus the fungi, bacteria and fungi that are decomposers, they break down the dead organic matter, such as dead algae, dead fishes, dead plants. Okay, so they break it down, break all of this down, and they use up oxygen in the process. Okay, so this is the second way that the uh, oxygen, dissolved oxygen concentration decreases in the river or in the water. Bacteria decompose or disintegrate dead organic organisms using up oxygen. So the dead organic matter is like their food. They have to break it down to obtain energy, and they need to use oxygen. Okay, yeah. Aerobic bacteria that needs to use oxygen. Just like we eat food, we break down the glucose to produce energy, right? And we need oxygen to break down glucose. Now, so this causes the level of biochemical oxygen demand of the bacteria in water to increase. That means they need more oxygen for the process of decomposition. So the BOD, or biochemical oxygen demand, increases, but the level of dissolved oxygen in the water decreases. Okay, because the oxygen is being used up for decomposition. So this leads to deterioration of the water quality. That means the worsening of the water quality. The water is considered more polluted, and the aquatic organisms lack oxygen for respiration, so they will die. So it will produce a dead river. So now let's find out about BOD. It's an important term and how it's related to water pollution. So this is an SPM past year's topic that frequently comes up, right? So it can be asked in the objective section, structured question, and even essay questions. All right. So make sure you know all about BOD. Now, BOD is biochemical oxygen demand. It is the amount of dissolved oxygen in the water needed and used by microorganisms such as bacteria and fungi, which are decomposers, to decompose or break down all the dead organic matter, such as dead leaves, dead bodies of animals, and even the animal waste products, right? In a liter of a water sample, in 1 liter of a water sample. It can be water from the river or pond or well, or even just tap water or distilled water. You can find out the BOD. All right. So BOD, that means the amount of dissolved oxygen needed for decomposition of the dead organic matter, is an indicator of the level of water pollution. So it's a high BOD good. If let's say compare two water samples, tap water and river water, which will have a higher BOD? Is the river water. Okay, so a high BOD means that when we have a water source that has a high BOD, it means that it has more oxygen, it needs more oxygen. Okay, it has a higher oxygen, a higher demand for oxygen. So it needs more oxygen for decomposition. Okay, so this implies that there's more organic matter such as dead plants, sewage, human waste or animal waste present in the water. Okay, because more oxygen is needed for the decomposition. So it implies that the level of water pollution is higher because when the level of water pollution is higher, there's more organic matter, right, in the water itself. Okay, so this organic matter are the dead substances, the bodies of dead organisms and so forth. Okay, that can be decomposed by the decomposers. It's not talking about the chemical toxins, right? So once the BOD is higher, that means the water source has more organic matter. It means that the level of water pollution is higher and the quality of the water is lower. Okay, but in terms of the presence of dissolved oxygen in the water, it is less. The dissolved oxygen in the water is less. That because most of the oxygen is used up for decomposition, so the fish will die, right, due to lack of oxygen for respiration. So high BOD is BAD, it's bad for the river or the lakes. So in this picture, you see the bacteria sort of feasting on dead organic matter, which to them is like food. Now, the decomposition of organic matter is similar to aerobic respiration for humans, right? The organic matter will react with the oxygen, broken down to form water, energy, and carbon dioxide. Okay, so oxygen is needed and carbon dioxide is released. So in the river, you can sometimes see bubbles coming out of the pond that is suffering or undergoing eutrophication. Okay, so the bubbles are probably carbon dioxide gas released from decomposition. Here's a memory rhyme to help you remember that high BOD is BAD, right? So look at the first diagram here. BOD high, fish will die. Okay. Then secondly, BOD low, fish will grow. Okay. So BOD high means that the dissolved oxygen content is low. That's why fish die. BOD low means dissolved oxygen content is high, so fish grow. Okay. Another quick rhyme here is BOD high, dissolved oxygen by, meaning that dissolved oxygen will become reduced. Fish no respiration die. Okay. But if you can't remember this, just stick to the first one. BOD high, fish die. BOD low, fish grow. So simple. So to end, here's a new question on how to reduce eutrophication in rivers. That means the solutions, right? So this can come out as an SPM HOTS question, and no answer is given for this in the textbook. All right. So let's suggest some ways to reduce eutrophication in rivers. Firstly, the farmers must practice agricultural management. That means they can reduce the fertilizer use, all right, and apply only what crops truly need. The amount of nitrates and phosphates that are needed. Apply only the amount that's needed based on soil data. So they have equipment to also measure the qualities of the soil, and from there they can find out how much fertilizer to use so that it's not in excess. All right. Then plant cover crops to reduce soil erosion and nutrient flow into rivers. So cover crops are crops, not the main crops. They are the crops that cover the ground while the main crops are being grown, or in between the planting of main crops. They will reduce soil erosion because they will lessen the impact of the rain on the soil. So less nutrients will flow into the rivers. Less nitrates and phosphates will flow into the rivers. Okay, because of the cover crops covering the ground. Now, community, or what can the public do? So we can use phosphate-free detergents to reduce the nutrient pollution. And then secondly, stop dumping organic waste or rubbish into drains or into rivers. Okay, so organic waste like all the composted stuff, things that can be composted but are not composted. Okay, um, including waste products also that are organic. That means they actually come from the living things, okay, that have died. Thirdly, what can the local authorities and the government do? So local authorities here means the municipal council or the Majlis Perbandaran, right? Now, treat sewage water well by using advanced methods in order to remove the nitrates and phosphates before the sewage is discharged into the rivers, so that the rivers will not have more nitrates and phosphates, okay, from the sewage water. Secondly, plant trees along the riverbanks, because these trees and plants can absorb some of the nitrates and phosphates before they enter the water ecosystem. Okay. Thirdly, restore wetlands or swamps which act as natural filters to trap the nutrients. Right? And fourthly, educate the public to raise awareness about protecting rivers so that public will not simply throw organic matter into the rivers. And fifthly, enforce laws to penalize illegal dumping of waste into rivers. This can occur if certain factories don't want to sort of process the waste before dumping into the river, right? So sometimes this waste matter may contain nitrates and phosphates, depending on the factory, what type of factory it is. Lastly, monitor water quality of rivers regularly so that if there's any eutrophication, steps can be taken at the beginning to lessen the impact of it all. Now, lastly, here is the whole answer for the question, what is eutrophication, and discuss strategies that can be implemented to reduce eutrophication. Okay, so this is the essay answer. So you can jot this down in your notebook, and also it is a type of SPM HOTS question, soalan ramalan, that can be asked in exam, as it's not been asked before, right? So A, what's the meaning of eutrophication? It is a process in which water ecosystems such as lakes and rivers become rich with nutrients such as nitrates and phosphates, causing changes to the ecosystem structure, such as algal blooms, oxygen depletion, dissolved oxygen depletion, and death of aquatic organisms. So what are the strategies used to prevent eutrophication? Firstly, agricultural management by farmers. Farmers should reduce the fertilizer use. Only apply what crops truly need by using soil data. Do not apply excessive fertilizers. Okay, excess fertilizers. Secondly, plant cover crops to keep the soil covered, prevent soil erosion, and reduce nutrient flow into the rivers. For the community, housewives and families should use eco-friendly detergents like phosphate-free products, phosphate-free detergents, to reduce nutrient pollution in rivers. Secondly, public should stop dumping organic waste or dead organic matter or rubbish into the drains and rivers. Okay, next, the local government authorities or local authorities or the municipal councils. They can treat sewage with more advanced methods to remove nitrates and phosphates before discharging the sewage water into the rivers. Secondly, plant trees along riverbanks to absorb the excess nutrients, that is the nitrates and phosphates. Thirdly, restore wetlands or swamps, which act as natural filters that trap these nutrients before they even reach the rivers. Fourthly, educate the public so communities understand their role in protecting the water quality of the rivers. Fifthly, monitor water quality regularly by using scientific tests to detect any problems early. And lastly, authorities can enforce laws on waste disposal and penalize illegal dumping of waste into the rivers, okay, especially check on the companies, right? And maybe also individuals who may be dumping waste, organic waste into rivers. Right, that's all for this lesson. So in the next lesson, we'll discuss the BOD experiment, which is important for structured, objective structured, and also essay questions.